Well, one of the things that I think has happened in the United States, which is a real problem, is that abortion is really seen as an identity issue. And so consequently, it's identified by Republicans in particular as being something that nasty women do. I think that what is being missed with this Supreme Court decision is a hugely important question of who decides on abortion. And the underlying principle of the ruling back in the 70s was that abortion was a private decision because a woman was making a decision about what was going on with her own body and the composition of her own family. And when we say a private decision, we mean one that's outside of the ruling of the state. And weirdly, what the Supreme Court has done is to make the intensely personal decision about what happens with your pregnancy part of a public decision. And that has just got to be wrong. Whatever the technicality is, it's got to be wrong for our private lives, those inner decisions about our own bodies that we make according to our conscience, to be a matter of the ruling of someone else. And that was what was great about the American Constitution, was that it held that principle.
And Michael, do you take issue with anything Anne has said there?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think that this is a good decision. And because the way in which Roe versus Wade 1973 legalized abortion across America was just wrong in terms of their own constitution. This is a step in the right direction for the rule of law. It's a step in the right direction for democracy, because the way the American Constitution works is that individual states make the decision as to whether certain issues like this are legal or illegal. That is how the Constitution works. And then what we have back in 1973 is unelected lawyers making a decision that was reserved for the states, and at the very most, maybe the Senate. So for nearly 200 years, that's the way that the American Constitution worked. And this drove a coach and horses through the way in which the law worked. And it was an egregious decision. And that word egregious has not been used to describe many decisions. But this, it appears as though the justices are saying it is an egregious contravention of the way the law works. And so we are now returning to something which is at the very least, democratic.
Michael, I guess some people would push back that, for example, some people regard abortion rights to be, a fundamental right, a question of body autonomy, and that should not necessarily be a decision for states, for majoritarian decisions, such as, for example, many facets of the Constitution cannot be changed, for example, on a state-to-state basis. And one of those things, i.e. abortion, should be included in that. Why should it be any different?
The Constitution in America and also the Constitution in this country recognizes the right to life is the most fundamental human right that a society can protect. If you think about the millions of pounds that are spent by the police in relation to one prosecution for murder, then you think about the fact that approximately 200,000 people every year are aborted in this country, and there's no investigation, there's nothing that happens. And the only reason why they are killed is because ultimately it comes down to the will of a mother. If, for example, the father or anybody else had gone up to the mother and had assaulted her, resulting in the death of a child, that person could have faced a charge of infanticide as well as assault on the mother. However, if the intention changes, then nobody is concerned whatsoever.
But in truth, Michael, even in the UK, this issue is not politicised in the same way that it is in America. According to a YouGov poll, only 9 in 10 people in the UK believe that women should have access to abortion. So most people don't see it in the way that you see it, at least in the UK.
Well, it depends what question you ask will then generate the answer that the person who has commissioned the questionnaire in the first place wishes to obtain. I think that most people in this country want a rowing back of the abortion rights that are in existence at the moment. And what we have seen in the last few weeks is we have seen a wide-scale liberalization, which not only puts, whatever your views are in relation to abortion and whether the fetus is a person or not, it puts women at risk in this country with the legalization of DIY abortions. And that is a very sad indictment on our society. I think, one of the popes once said that you can tell a lot by society how it treats its most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable person in our society is that person which is inside the womb. And that's how we treat 200,000 people every year in the society.
OK, well, according to several polls, including another YouGov poll, a plurality of people do think that the 24-week limit in the UK is about right. But just coming back to you, Anne, I mean, what do you say to that point about it should be a democratic question? The fact that it has become so politicised in America is that it has been a fragile consensus, that many people have been expecting that at some point Roe versus Wade would unravel because the question of privacy is just not strong enough for some people. And actually, this should really be fought on a democratic level, on a state-to-state level. Why should it be a decision for lawyers?
So I think there are two different issues, really, and they get wrapped up in this in a way that I think you're right is not terribly helpful and makes a huge muddle out of it. Yes, it's right that on a state-by-state basis, elected representatives should decide on what the abortion law should be. I agree with that. However, as we've accepted, the Constitution sits back from those state-by-state laws, and in some ways you could say it kind of, sets out those underlying principles that makes America a country. They're things that society generally agrees with. And that right to privacy, that is crucial to that. Now, Michael and I will hugely disagree with how that will be interpreted. I will say that when we think about the morals of abortion and the right and wrongs of it, and this is what I try and explore in my book, we don't always start from the point of view of the embryo and the fetus. We start from the point of view of the woman and her ability to make a private decision. Now, that's really what underlaid the court's ruling. Now we have a court that is dominated because of appointments that were made by President Trump, by people who are much more disposed to agree with Michael. And let's face it, the decision about abortion largely is not whether it's constitutional or whether it's democratic. It's whether or not someone thinks it's right or it's wrong. Michael thinks it's wrong in all circumstances. I just don't know whether an individual's decision is right or wrong, but what I do know is absolutely right is that she should be able to make that decision for herself because it's her body, her family, and her life.
Mm. And also, Michael, I mean, what do you say to those that there seems to be a lot of the time in the pro-life perspective, overemphasis on the embryo or the fetus, for example, ignoring or perhaps trivialising the moral capability of women to be able to decide for themselves decisions that fundamentally alter the course of their own life? Where do you place women in all of this and the fact that they have to bear the burden of pregnancy?
Women are very much at the heart of this debate. And what happens is that very often what the pro-life organizations in this country in America try to do is present women with all the facts so that they can make an informed decision as to whether their choice as to what they are doing is going to be a good thing or a bad thing.
You're talking about an informed decision, but you still only want them to be allowed to make one decision.
I think what it comes down to is that a society will change its laws based upon the culture that exists at the time. And unless pro-life activists are able to win over the population, it's unlikely that the law will change. And even if the law is changed in America on a federal level, then there will be battles and continuing battles at a state level. But I think the problem is that there's been a lot of misinformation and fake news out there, whereby when people are told certain things about the fetus and the fact that it's not really a person. And I think, Anne and I will probably agree that the fetus is just Latin for small person. It is a person. It does die, and it involves the death of a person. And when people understand the full reality as to what abortion is, very often people will make the opposite decision as to what we expect them to make. So women do have to be absolutely at the heart of this decision, but they, when they are given the full facts, will very often choose not to go through with abortions.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much both for joining me. Michael Phillips, Christian Legal Centre lawyer, and Anne Frady, former Chief Executive of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service and author of The Moral Case for Choice. Thank you both